She was one of the most powerful women in the city, a millionaire CEO admired for her brilliance, wealth, and influence. Yet in the middle of her empire, her life was slipping away, unnoticed by everyone around her. Doctors missed the signs. Colleagues looked the other way. But someone saw what no one else would. A man whose presence was often invisible, because of the color of his skin. He was just a janitor, until the day he became her only chance of survival. What he uncovered would change both of their lives forever. Marcus had grown used to being unseen. For years, he worked quietly in the tall glass towers of the city, pushing carts, mopping floors, and making sure the offices sparkled long before the executives arrived. To most, he was just the janitor, someone people passed by without a second glance. Yet behind the uniform and the broom was a man of resilience. He carried the weight of struggles most would never notice, the tired legs from double shifts, the unspoken sting of being overlooked, the quiet dignity of doing what had to be done. Every evening, Marcus cleaned the same executive floor, where framed photos of power and success lined the walls. The crown jewel of that empire was Eleanor Carter, a millionaire CEO, celebrated for her achievements and praised for her brilliance. She rarely crossed paths with him, and when she did, it was with a polite, distant nod reserved for someone who was supposed to blend into the background. To Marcus, it was just another night at work. But something unusual caught his attention, something so small, most would have ignored it. He didn't realize it yet, but that quiet moment of observation would place him at the center of a story no one saw coming. Marcus had seen 1,000 office nights blur into each other, trash bins emptied, desks wiped clean, and fluorescent lights humming in the silence. But this night felt different. While cleaning the executive floor, his eyes caught something odd. A glass of water, half finished, resting on Eleanor Carter's desk. He wasn't sure why it stood out. Maybe it was the faint smudge of lipstick at the rim, or maybe it was the way the glass trembled ever so slightly when she had set it down earlier. Marcus remembered the look on her face when she rushed past him that afternoon, her skin pale, her steps unsteady, her hand clutching her side as if she was trying to steady herself. He had seen exhaustion before. He knew what stress looked like. But this was different. Something was wrong. At first, he told himself to ignore it. After all, who was he? A janitor. Not a doctor. Not an executive. Just the man who swept the floors. His job was to stay invisible, not to notice things that weren't his concern. But the thought gnawed at him. The next day, he noticed again. Eleanor Carter arrived later than usual, her stride broken by hesitation, her eyes glassy. When she sat in her chair, Marcus saw her grip the desk as though the room was spinning. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe, no one cared. Executives walked by, assistants carried papers, voices echoed with deals and deadlines. Yet the CEO, the very woman who commanded all this power, looked like she was fighting something silently. Marcus hesitated. Should he say something? If he spoke up, would anyone listen? Or would they just see it as a janitor overstepping, assuming something he couldn't possibly understand? That was the cruel truth. When you're black, when you're at the bottom of the corporate ladder, your words don't carry the same weight. People see the uniform, not the man inside it. Still, he couldn't let it go. His own mother had died young, her symptoms dismissed as just stress until it was too late. He remembered the helplessness, the way no one had listened until tragedy struck. He couldn't watch history repeat itself. But speaking up came at a cost. The following week, Eleanor collapsed in the lobby. A crowd formed instantly, executives, security, assistants. Phones whipped out, not to call for help, but to capture the scene. Whispers spread like wildfire, she fainted. She's overworked. Probably nothing serious. Marcus pushed forward, his heart pounding. He had seen the signs building for days. Her trembling hands. The shortness of breath. The sudden fatigue. It wasn't nothing, it was a warning. Call an ambulance, he shouted. But his voice was drowned out by the buzz of speculation. A security guard stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Step back. Staff only. Marcus felt the sting of the words. Staff only. As if his concern didn't matter. As if his presence itself was a disruption. He wanted to argue, but he knew how quickly things could spiral. He'd seen it too many times. When a black man raised his voice, people didn't hear urgency. They heard threat. So he bit his tongue and waited, helplessly watching as Eleanor was finally escorted to her office instead of to the hospital. The executives insisted she was fine. Just needs rest, one said dismissively. She's tough. But Marcus knew tough didn't stop illness. Tough didn't heal. Days passed, and Eleanor's condition worsened. She arrived pale, her steps unsteady, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Yet every meeting went on. Every deal continued. And every time Marcus tried to hint at his concern, he was brushed aside. One evening, as he emptied a bin outside the conference room, he overheard two executives laughing. She's probably exaggerating, one said. You know how dramatic people can be. The other snickered. Even if something is wrong, she's got the best doctors money can buy. She doesn't need janitors worrying about her. The words burned. They hadn't said his name, but Marcus knew who they meant. He was the janitor, the invisible observer whose concern was considered laughable. That night, Marcus went home restless. The echoes of their laughter haunted him. He thought of Eleanor's trembling hands, her fainting, her slow steps. If no one else cared, should he? Or was he risking his job by interfering? But deep down, he knew, staying silent could cost a life. The breaking point came one Friday evening. Marcus was finishing up when he spotted Eleanor sitting alone in her office, long after everyone else had left. Her shoulders slumped, her face pale, her breathing shallow. A sheen of sweat glistened on her forehead. For a moment, Marcus froze. He knew the protocol: don't disturb the executives. Don't speak unless spoken to. But protocol didn't matter now. He knocked gently on the doorframe. She looked up, startled. For a split second, her guarded CEO mask cracked, and he saw the fear in her eyes. Are you okay? He asked softly. She opened her mouth to reply, but instead, her body swayed. Her chair rattled as she collapsed against the desk. Marcus rushed forward, catching her just before she hit the floor. His pulse raced. This wasn't exhaustion, this was something serious. He reached for his phone, dialing emergency services with trembling hands. When the paramedics arrived minutes later, Marcus expected relief. Instead, suspicion greeted him. What happened here? One asked, eyeing Marcus carefully. I found her like this, Marcus stammered. The paramedic's gaze lingered a little too long, as if silently questioning whether Marcus had done something wrong. The weight of that stare was suffocating. It wasn't new, Marcus had lived with those looks his whole life. In stores, on sidewalks, even at work. Suspicion followed him like a shadow. But there was no time to defend himself. Please, he urged, she needs help now. Finally, they turned their focus to Eleanor. At the hospital, the truth came out. Eleanor had been ignoring the symptoms of a serious medical condition, one that could have been fatal if not caught in time. The doctors admitted she was lucky. Very lucky. But when word spread about who had called the ambulance, Marcus's relief turned to unease. In the days that followed, whispers filled the office halls. Some praised him quietly, but others questioned his motives. Why was he even in her office? One voice asked. Wasn't he overstepping? Another muttered. It didn't matter that he had saved her life. What mattered, in their eyes, was that he was a janitor who dared to step outside his place. Marcus felt the shift immediately. The stares lingered longer. Conversations hushed when he walked by. Tasks he had done for years without question were suddenly scrutinized. One evening, as he left the building, he noticed a security guard trailing behind him, not too close, but close enough to send a message. The gratitude he had expected never came. Instead, his act of courage painted a target on his back. Still, Marcus couldn't regret what he'd done. He thought of his mother, of the life that might have been saved if someone had spoken up sooner. He thought of Eleanor, alive because he had refused to look away. But beneath the relief was a growing unease. He knew how fragile his position was. He knew that being a black man in a white-dominated corporate world meant that even heroism could be twisted against him. And as he prepared for another long night of work, one thought haunted him: saving her life might have cost him his own. What Marcus didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The days ahead would bring not just whispers, but accusations. Not just suspicion, but confrontation. And the real test of courage was yet to come. The office had returned to its rhythm. Phones rang, meetings stretched on, and deals were signed, as though nothing monumental had happened. Eleanor Carter, the CEO whose life Marcus had helped save, was recovering, her return to power quietly celebrated in the upper floors. But Marcus's world was shifting. He noticed it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. The way managers who had once nodded politely now eyed him with suspicion. Even his cleaning schedule was suddenly questioned, his work double-checked as though he had forgotten how to mop a floor after years of doing it flawlessly. He had expected gratitude. Instead, he felt the coldness of being marked. One evening, while emptying trash cans, Marcus overheard a meeting through the thin walls of the conference room. A voice he recognized, Mr. Daniels, one of the senior executives, spoke with a biting tone. "It doesn't look good," Daniel said. "The janitor in her office? At that hour? Alone? We can't ignore how it looks." A second voice replied sharply. "He called the ambulance. Without him, she might not be here today." Daniel scoffed. "That's one way of seeing it. Or maybe he knew too much. Maybe he wanted to be in the right place at the right time. You know how people take advantage of situations." Marcus froze, the weight of those words pressing into his chest. He wasn't being seen as a hero, he was being painted as suspicious. It was the cruel irony of his life. He had stepped forward when everyone else looked away. And now, his courage was being twisted into a weapon against him. The whispers grew louder in the weeks that followed. Security guards shadowed his movements. A new manager scrutinized his time cards, hinting that Marcus was lingering too long on certain floors. He heard rumors that he had been snooping in executive offices. Every look, every word, every pause dripped with accusation. The breaking point came on a Monday morning. Marcus arrived at work, his badge suddenly failing to unlock the doors. He tried again, red light. A guard approached, expression unreadable. "Your access has been restricted," the guard said. Marcus frowned. "Restricted? Why?" "You'll need to speak with HR." His heart pounded as he was escorted, not welcomed, to the HR office. He sat across from a polished woman in a gray suit, her smile tight and cold. "We've received concerns," she said. "Questions about your conduct." "My conduct?" Marcus repeated, stunned. "I've been doing this job for years. Never missed a shift. Never caused trouble." The woman's eyes flicked to the file on her desk. "It's been noted that you were found in the CEO's office outside of your cleaning schedule. There are suspicions about your intentions." Marcus's chest tightened. "I saved her life. That's why I was there." She collapsed. Her smile didn't waver. "That may be true. But perception matters. And the perception, Marcus, is that you crossed a line." The word struck harder than any physical blow. Perception. Not truth. Not evidence. Just the lens of prejudice twisting his actions into misconduct. He left the office in silence, the weight of the accusation hanging heavier than the mop bucket he had carried for years. News spread quickly among staff. Some avoided eye contact, while others whispered in corners. Eleanor herself had not yet returned, still recovering at home. Marcus wondered if she even knew what was happening. But the system was already moving against him. That Friday, he was summoned again, this time, not to HR, but to a disciplinary hearing. A small room. A table. 3 executives seated on the other side, their expressions unreadable. Mr. Daniels was there, his voice sharp as a blade. "Marcus," he began, "we've reviewed the concerns. Unauthorized presence in executive spaces. Suspicious behavior. And now, questions of whether sensitive information may have been accessed." Marcus's blood boiled. "I never touched anything. I was there because she collapsed. I called for help. You know that." Daniels leaned back, his smirk subtle. "Maybe. Or maybe you saw an opportunity. People do strange things when they want to climb out of their station." The words dripped with venom. Out of their station. That was the truth of it. They couldn't accept that a janitor had been the one to save a millionaire CEO. It didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. Marcus's hands trembled under the table. He wanted to shout, to fight back, to demand justice. But he knew how it would look. A black man raising his voice in a room full of white executives. It wouldn't matter if he was right, they'd see threat, not truth. So he spoke carefully, his voice steady but burning with controlled fury. "You can twist this however you want. But you know the truth. I was the only one who noticed what was happening. I was the one who acted. If that makes me guilty of anything, it's of caring when no one else did." The room fell silent. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw hesitation in one executive's eyes. But Daniels quickly cut in. "We'll be reviewing your employment status. Until then, your access remains suspended." It wasn't a decision. It was a warning. That night, Marcus walked home through the darkened streets, the city lights blurring through the sting of unshed tears. He thought of his mother again, her illness ignored until it was too late. He thought of Eleanor, alive because he refused to look away. And now he thought of himself, punished for doing the right thing. Was this the price of being visible in a world that preferred him invisible? The days dragged on, each shift heavier than the last. Marcus felt the weight of eyes on him everywhere. In the cafeteria, whispers followed him. In the lobby, guards tracked his steps. His name was no longer Marcus, it was that janitor. But beneath the fear, a fire grew. He refused to let their lies erase the truth. The turning point came when Eleanor returned. Her first day back was marked with celebration, flowers in her office, applause from staff, articles praising her resilience. She looked stronger, though still pale, her steps measured. Marcus wasn't scheduled to clean her floor that evening, but he went anyway. He needed to see her. Needed her to know what was happening. When she emerged from her office, their eyes met for the first time since that night. For a moment, Marcus saw recognition. Gratitude. Even warmth. But then, an executive appeared at her side, whispering in her ear. Eleanor's expression shifted, hesitation replacing warmth. She gave Marcus a polite nod, nothing more, before walking away. The distance between them felt wider than ever. That evening, Marcus found a notice waiting in his locker. The words blurred as he read them. Due to concerns regarding conduct and unauthorized presence in executive offices, your employment is hereby terminated, effective immediately. His chest tightened. The world spun. Everything he had worked for, years of loyalty, quiet labor, enduring invisibility, erased with a single sheet of paper. And beneath it all, the truth burned. It wasn't about conduct. It was about control. About reminding him of his place. As he packed his few belongings, the janitorial closet felt smaller than ever. His hands shook as he closed the door for the last time. Walking out of the building, past the lobby where he had once saved Eleanor's life, Marcus felt the eyes of the guards on him, watching to make sure he left. He stepped into the night, the cool air hitting his face. The city moved on, indifferent, its glass towers gleaming as if nothing had changed. But everything had. For Marcus, this was more than the loss of a job. It was the collision of two truths, that he had done everything right, and that in the eyes of power, it would never be enough. He thought of Eleanor again, alive, breathing, walking back into her empire because of him. And yet, he was cast out like a criminal. The injustice cut deeper than words. But beneath the pain, something stirred. A resolve. If they thought silencing him would erase the truth, they were wrong. Marcus had lost everything: his job, his reputation, his place in the building he had served faithfully for years. But what he didn't know was that his story was far from over. Because sometimes, the darkest moments spark the brightest flames. And the world was about to hear his voice, whether they wanted to or not. Marcus walked away from the glass towers with nothing but a box of belongings and the bitter taste of betrayal. He had given years of quiet, faithful work to a system that never once saw him as more than the janitor. And when he finally stepped out of the shadows, when he dared to care enough to save a life, that same system turned on him. Losing his job should have broken him. For weeks, it nearly did. He woke each morning with no uniform to put on, no building to scrub clean, no elevator rides to silent executive floors. The routine that had once drained him now left a void so heavy it pressed against his chest. And worse than the unemployment was the stigma, neighbors whispering, former colleagues avoiding him, the stain of suspicion that clung to his name like smoke. But in that silence, Marcus found something else. Reflection. He realized that what happened to him wasn't just about a single job, a single building, or even a single CEO. It was about a pattern, a truth etched into the lives of millions. A truth that says when you are black, your actions are scrutinized, your motives questioned, your humanity often denied. Even heroism can be twisted into guilt. And yet, Marcus refused to let his story be erased. He began sharing what happened, first with friends, then with community groups, and eventually with local reporters who caught wind of the quiet injustice. The story spread: the janitor who saved a millionaire CEO's life, only to be fired and branded suspicious. People listened. Some with outrage. Some with disbelief. But many with recognition, because they had lived echoes of the same story themselves. The impact rippled outward. His story wasn't just about one man and one act of courage, it was about the cost of invisibility, the weight of prejudice, and the resilience it takes to stand when the world tries to push you down. For Eleanor, the CEO whose life he saved, the truth could no longer be avoided. Though she had been shielded by her executives, she eventually learned what had happened to Marcus. Shame mixed with gratitude, forcing her to confront the ugly reality that while her body was being healed, the man who saved her was being broken by the very system she led. But whether Eleanor spoke out or remained silent, one thing was clear: Marcus's story had already left its mark. Because in the end, this wasn't just about one janitor in one office. It was about how many times black men and women are forced to prove their worth, only to have it questioned. It was about how often their humanity is overlooked until tragedy strikes. Marcus lost his job. But he found his voice. And in doing so, he gave others permission to speak, too. So the question isn't whether his story matters, it's whether we'll listen. Whether we'll see the countless Marcuses still walking invisible halls, carrying unseen burdens, noticing what others ignore. Because the truth is this: he saved her life. But who will save his? Who will save all of ours, if we continue to ignore the signs?